Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, we've all seen the stories of the crisis at the border, but there is so much more to learn, which is why I'm delighted to be joined today by the Executive Director of the Salvadoran American Leadership and Educational Fund, Jocelyn Duarte. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, as we were talking before we actually started rolling camera, this really is personal to you. I mean, you run an organization that advocates a lot of support for immigrants from lots of Latino countries, but this is really a personal journey for you as well.
It is. I am the daughter of immigrant parents. My father immigrated here fleeing civil war, as well as my mother from Guatemala and El Salvador. And so I've intentionally made my work to be within my Central American community here in Los Angeles and to serve immigrant families, as well as my transnational work that I've been doing as a student, dating back to being a student and working in Central America, and really having a transnational approach to the work that I do, understanding that patterns of migration, the root causes of migration, and how that shapes our community here in Los Angeles.
Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, there is really a remarkable story with a lot of pathos and a lot of heart and a lot of tragedy taking place right now, but there's a lot of misconception about asylum seekers and why they're coming. And what is the true story about why someone would actually leave their country and make this treacherous journey?
I think that in the most recent administration, in the prior administration, there was a lot of conversation that was happening around immigration and policies that were being anti-immigrant, and we're really just bringing to light what our community has been facing for decades. If you look back to our immigration system, our immigration history, it has been very exclusionary and anti-immigrant. We have the civil wars of Central America that created that diaspora, right, that came here to the United States fleeing a war that was funded by the US. So we have, over the span of many years, a broken immigration system that has not only pushed on one end, foreign aid, a lot of violence that was created, that is existing in those countries that are pushing people to flee, a lot of gender-based violence, a lot of gang violence. And so all of these things have kind of bottlenecked, right? And what we're seeing at the border is a result of all of these failed policies, immigration policies over many decades.
Then also there's an issue right now, I've been reading about the weather and the crisis of global warming and the flooding and all of the things that are happening in Guatemala, which is actually sort of aiding a lot of this exodus.
So we have not only economic, refugees, we have people that are fleeing violence, environmental refugees, people that are fleeing these conditions that are, happening in their countries that are all somehow connected. And so there's a reason why we need to understand these root causes in order to be able to change our immigration system that allows us to understand our role as the United States in these countries we are a push and pull factor.
Okay, so to that point, it's not all roses and sunshine once you come to the United States. And I know that in President Biden's first press conference, he talked about these root causes, as you said. And because of the corruption in most of the governments that are the areas in which people are fleeing, that it needs to be more boots on the ground. It needs to be a more direct aid to the people and those that are working in those communities. Do you think that that is a sound approach, or do you think that that is something that is a little bit too optimistic?
Historically, what has happened is that these countries have been given large amounts, millions and billions of dollars in foreign aid to stop migration and not really address the root causes of migration in terms of like economic, opportunities for people fleeing, protection from the violence that is happening in their countries, gender-based violence, the femicide, right? So I think it's definitely the right approach to work with people that are on the ground to ensure that the aid is getting directly to people and to really create and shake up the system. There is very little oversight, I think, when it comes to foreign aid and the connection of the root causes of migration.
I know that there is questions, how is it possible for so many unaccompanied minors to make this trip, thousands of miles across the desert in untenable conditions and situations? How is this, how is it possible that these children are making this trip? You hear about them riding on the tops of trains. You hear about them being, so young and so fragile and leaving everyone and everything they know. It seems to be an impossible thing for them to have achieved. How many pass away on the trip? What happens when they actually get here? It's terrifying, especially if you understand what it's like to be a parent and have a child and send your child on this quest.
I think that for me, when we talk about unaccompanied minors, SALEF has been working with unaccompanied minors for the past, I would say 2 years in helping as a response to what was happening at the border. So when we hear the stories of why these young men, mostly young men and young women, decide to take this journey, it's because it's a life or death decision, and they have to decide whether they're going to take their chance in that treacherous journey, or they're going to stay behind and possibly die. And so it's very real, how these mostly gang violence that occurs in their countries pushes them to leave. We have been helping unaccompanied minors not only when they arrive here in Los Angeles by helping them, leave detention centers, being released and finding a sponsor here in the United States, but also when they arrive here in the city of Los Angeles, helping them with very critical services such as housing, connecting them to legal resources, health, mental health, ensuring that we have developed a system of care to support unaccompanied minors, because this is a very special population that needs a lot of intense centered, client-centered approach to dealing with most of the things, not only with the journey, their trauma from their journey, but the trauma that they were fleeing as well. I think that no mother would ever want to send their child on a dangerous journey, and I think that that's sometimes absent from the conversation, where people think that parents are just sending their children, to another country because they're looking for some sort of economic, for an economic reason, but rather really is like, as a mother of a teen boy, I could never imagine having to make that decision for my own son. So, important to understand is what is causing these youth to flee, and we have to do more than just admit that this is a gang problem and that there's violence, but what are we doing to address this violence in these countries, which has been a pattern over the span of decades.
Well, you're going to have your hands full with, we have 1,000 unaccompanied minors are going to going to the Long Beach Convention Center at least through the summer, and then you also have the San Diego, and heaven help what's happening in Texas. But what happens when they get here? I know that SALEF is very outspoken and very aggressive in terms of helping with support legally and, as you mentioned, resources for them. But what happens to these asylum seekers when they get to the U.S.? It's not all everything's fine now.
Definitely it's not, especially because the youth come to enter a city that already has a high rate of already has a gang problem. Mostly you have kids that were fleeing, from these gangs in their home country, and they come here and are potentially targets and victims of the same gangs that they're fleeing. So there has to be like a multi-prong approach to providing services for them. And if you look at it as a way of preventing homelessness and ensuring that once they are released from detention and they are released to either a family licensed care like Casa Libre, or they are released to a family member, there's a lot of work that needs to happen. So SALEF has developed a system of care that allows us to be able to care for them, particularly focusing on enrolling them in GRID programs, ensuring that they have gang interventionist prevention support, that we are enrolling them in in mental health, healthcare providers, providers, with our community partner like Clínica Monseñor Romero, ensuring that if they are experiencing homelessness, a lot of our work is out doing outreach out in like the MacArthur Park area. And so we want to make sure that when they get here that they have the support so that they don't end up back on the street again being a target for these very same gang, that they were fleeing from.
I know that part of the program is also helping them with the entire immigration process to do it legally and make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, et cetera. There's a new immigration act that President Biden has put forth. Has it made the process any easier, or are there changes that are happening that would affect what you are able to do with these asylum seekers, and even those who are already here in the U.S. that are perhaps not documented at this time and are looking to actually become legal citizens?
We definitely have seen a shift, and I get, for community-based organizations that are supporting immigrant families, the changes couldn't come fast enough because we've had such a backlog, whether it's through citizenship and citizenship applications and people being able to become citizens, or seeing denials of asylum seekers and the changes that were made to policies internally and memos with USCIS, and we're starting to see shifts, and we're starting to see we're moving in the right direction, but it's not coming fast enough. And so it really needs to be an overhaul of our immigration system that needs to take place in order for us to be able to process these for the legal processes that are already in place, like becoming a citizen. It shouldn't take you 1.5 years, 2 years to become a citizen, or it shouldn't, or seeing those high rates of denial, taking away the violence component when it comes to asylum seekers, and having those provisions being removed really hurt asylum seekers, or even women that were fleeing based on gender violence. So all of those things that we are hopeful for this administration, and why we put our support into the change that we saw that we needed. It was because we need this change urgently.
Right. Okay, so I need a little bit of a clarification, because there are youth that have been here in the United States for a certain period of time. And I know DACA, but I don't know, what's the difference between TPS and DACA?
Well, the similarity is that it's basically a deferral. It's not permanent status. It is basically like a permit for you to be here that has to be renewed every 18 months.
Okay.
And so in that case, in that they're both similar. TPS is temporary protected status, and temporary protected status is basically a band-aid immigration remedy that is it's temporary, and it's temporary because like I mentioned, you have to renew every so often, and it's a very vetted process. You have to ensure that you're following the law, that you're paying taxes, that you're an upstanding citizen, and it's temporary for that reason. But you have people that have been on TPS for over 20 years.
Oh my.
So people from countries like Central America, like El Salvador, El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua are the 3 countries in Central America that are beneficiaries of TPS, where you have over 250,000 TPS holders right from the region. The reason why certain countries become eligible, people from certain countries become eligible for TPS, is because their country was either a natural disaster or something that prevents them from going back home. So in the case of Central America, it was the earthquakes, Hurricane Mitch, and things like that happened in the early 2000s that made it possible for them to apply for something like TPS. Now DACA is for youth, basically youth that came here at a very young age, and did not come here obviously on their own, willingly, because they were children, and they are then granted status as long as they meet the requirements, like having attended high school, attending college, and again, very vetted process. Have to have great record, right? No criminal history, paying taxes, and being great citizens. So I think that the takeaway and the similarities on both of these programs is that the people that have these are beneficiaries of these programs are good people. Immigrants that are out there, are working, are going to school, and are making meaningful contributions to our society.
And I'm going to add, because I know that there's a lot of thought that they are taking from the general fund and not putting back in. So I'd imagine that there's also the issue of making sure there's a clarification that these are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, and those that are not just taking from our system from those that are paying taxes.
Yeah, that conversation, it's always very important to understand and to clarify. Immigrants that are here, that they pay taxes, they are working and making contributions, are law-abiding citizens, like you mentioned, and they are not eligible to receive benefits like a citizen of the United States would be eligible to receive. So there's always a misconception that they're taking from our system. Actually, they pay more taxes. They pay millions and billions of dollars of taxes that they themselves do not get to benefit from. And I would say that they aren't taking anybody's jobs because they're doing the work that other people don't want to do. And so I think that, whether you are an immigrant and you are picking, you're a farm worker, or you're a DACA student who is a medical, student, or even a doctor, right? Those are both equally as important to our society, and it are exactly what immigrants do to our country, which is make meaningful contributions, and that is historical.
How many clients are you able to serve?
So we are currently helping in response to COVID and providing over 400 families with food at the moment. Every month we're doing this, and then on the legal side, we've helped over 1,000 people become citizens since we initiated our program back in 2017, and we continue to serve, through our scholarship fund, our youth, and our summer youth programs. So SALEF is able to work with about 10,000 people a year.
Well, now that things are opening up, we're not past the pandemic crisis, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. People are becoming vaccinated, and it seems as if life is slowly moving towards a certain level of normalcy. What have you noticed in the communities that you serve, and what has the pandemic done to them, and what are some of the issues that you are addressing with them? Are you going to continue the food programs? Is there an issue with employment? What are you seeing?
When the pandemic started a year ago, and I can't believe I'm saying this, that we started this began a year ago, we at SALEF had to take a moment to reimagine how we were going to deliver our services, understanding the barriers that our community faced, whether when it came to technology, when it came to texting, and everybody's hopping on Zoom, but they necessarily did not have the same tools that everybody else had. Definitely, we reimagined that our community was going to be disproportionately hit compared to other communities. And so we knew that whatever services or resources were going to become available were going to be limited, and probably they themselves would be barred from accessing those services, either out of fear or because they would not be eligible. And so we really thought of how is it that we can serve our community better, and how can we get this information, for example, of resources that are available to them, how can we get these critical services to them? So we created a model of what we call outreach and education, leveraging resources that we had to provide food. And so since May of 2020, SALEF has been providing 400 families a month with food. We wanted to also be very conscious of the food that we were serving, making sure that it was culturally sensitive and that it was healthy food, because our community are the essential workers, they are the street vendors, they are the janitors, they are the students in college, and so they also need to be healthy. And so we wanted to make sure that they had access to not only fresh food, but that it was healthy food that they would actually use. So we partnered with our community-based clinic, which is Clínica Romero, looked at how to develop a healthy food, what we call healthy food bag. And when we did that, we saw people flocking to our doors.
Sure.
We reached out, we're very thankful for our partnership with the LA Regional Food Bank and being able to become a site for distribution for them. And then we just kind of brought everybody together, and we pulled all of our resources together, made these, we make these amazing food bags, but inside we have information that's so important. We use a lot of phone banking, and we basically became kind of like a call center. So people could call in for food, but then we definitely assess them and see what other resources they need. Do they need help with unemployment? Do they need help maybe perhaps finding a doctor for COVID testing? We've done a lot of work in ensuring when people needed to get tested, to give them the information, remove the barriers that people have in terms of that fear of being tested in our community. And now we're again, multi-pronged approach to not only providing food, but also ensuring that our community is vaccinating. And that nexus between immigration, health, is very important to have that lens to be able to support our community.
Well, speaking of outreach, I know that you have been down to the border to do outreach and support for those that are at the border, the asylum seekers. And you said that there is a plan to go and do that again.
Yes, definitely. So we, because of the pandemic, we had to make sure not only did we have a crisis of the people at the border, but we had a crisis at home in our very own community. So we have to take care of our community here first, and then also as providers, we want to be safe and healthy ourselves. And so we have been waiting for vaccinations to be available for frontline workers and community workers, health workers. Now that we're moving towards the right direction of ensuring that our community is vaccinated, now we have the ability to start organizing and coming together to build our legal team, our health team, and our humanitarian aid, bringing back down food and donations to the people that are basically camped out in front of the border, which is what is called the Chaparral, and being able to bring them the very crucial resources that they need.
Bird's eye view of this whole thing seems absolutely overwhelming and almost impossible to even manage. Are you overwhelmed and intimidated, or do you just feel as if every day you're re-energized that you have to be able to make a difference, if not for everyone, at least for a goodly portion?
Every morning I wake up and I feel very fortunate to be able to do this work and really transform my community. Not only my community here, but my community, transnationally. So I think that one of our mantras at work is, the work that we do is transforming lives. And I think that it is very, I haven't had time to stop and think about being overwhelmed, because there's a need and there's a knock on our door and we have to respond.
Do you rely on the kindness of strangers? Do you have a volunteer group that you could utilize if in fact they were willing to help?
Definitely. We definitely need lots of volunteers, obviously within COVID guidelines, right?
Sure.
To help us not only phone bank, reaching out to the community to make sure that they're receiving access to vaccines, helping them sign up for whatever, mobile vaccination sites there might be that are available through the county and the city. We also need people to help us do the hard labor of packing food and, distributing this food to not only like the most vulnerable communities, like seniors, elderly folks, but also young children, right, that are experiencing food insecurity now more than ever, especially with our schools being shut down and them not having access to those maybe 2 or 3 meals that they were receiving at school and even after school programming. So we definitely encourage people to visit our website at www.salef.org, and they can send us an email, and we can have them come over and help us volunteer. And we can always use donations. So if people want to help feed a family, they can make a donation on our website, on our donate button, and it will definitely go a long way and allow us to help feed a family for a week. Something as small as $30 would help us be able to provide food for a family.
So the name of the organization, the American Leadership and Educational Fund, Salvadoran American Leadership and Educational Fund, the original name, has it morphed in terms of it seems that the scope of what SALEF has done, over the last 2+ decades has broadened. Is that accurate to say?
Well, we were founded 26 years ago, by Carlos Vaquerano. He was a war refugee, unrecognized at that point. His family, he had lost 3 of his brothers, and so he needed to flee El Salvador and come here to the United States. He founded SALEF in 1995, and he did it with the idea of creating access to education for my generation. And so as our, at the core of our work through our social justice lens is ensuring that youth have access to education, and what we are doing is ensuring to respond to the changes and the needs of our community. So we can't sit around and not respond to something like COVID or food insecurity or any social injustice. So we want to make sure that our work is reflective of the needs of our community. So it's all within the scope of our work, which is providing support to immigrant families.
And as well as these, very important substantive things, there's a legal group that helps as well, that actually gives legitimate legal advice, not just theoretical advice.
Yes, we were able to launch our legal program back in 2019, and we have been serving people, helping people become citizens, helping DACA students at the time, renew their DACA applications, and now, obviously because they can accept initial applications, we're supporting youth doing that and helping people navigate the immigration system. It's something that when I came to SALEF in 2017, I saw the need for it. And so as our capacity has grown, we have responded to the need. We live in a city with many, many immigrants. And so there are different organizations that are providing services, and the need is just so great, is that we need to make sure that organizations like SALEF are providing legal services, because we want to make sure that we are not only providing a service, but we're protecting our community from people that are committing fraud, or sometimes are practicing immigration law illegally. And so we want to make sure that we're there to educate our community on what it is a Department of Justice recognized organization, who is an attorney, and who is definitely just a notary public. And so that is really at the core of our mission, again, supporting immigrant families achieve representation in the United States.
Are you optimistic?
I am. I think that I took a deep breath in January when we had a new administration, because I knew that it was, for some of our families, it really was a life or death situation, or it is a not only because of COVID and the way that the response to COVID and accessing vaccines, but also of the span of decades of separations of family. And so there's real new hope with the new Citizenship Act, and ensuring that people that have been here, that have been making meaningful contributions to our country, that are law-abiding citizens, that are here and have been here, have the opportunity for the first time to be able to, have the ability maybe to even go back to their country and have a pathway to a residency, a pathway to citizenship. This is their home, and I think that is why I'm optimistic, because I know that the change that needs to happen is going to happen, not only because of SALEF, but because of all the organizations and the people in this wonderful city, in this country, that know the change that needs to happen and are making the change happen.
I'm sure your parents are very proud of you.
Thank you.
All right. So if people want information, SALEF.org. All right. Well, it was lovely to meet you. Thank you for all of this incredibly important information, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for having me and giving me the space.
Of course. And that is a wrap on this LA Current.